Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Judges in the Community. I'm Vera, a research apprentice at the BJI, and today we're diving into the newly award-winning work of Judges Beth Bloom, Robin Rosenberg, and Shaniek Maynard of the Southern District of Florida, shedding light on their initiative to bring young adults into the courthouse for a uniquely powerful and illuminatingly raw look at what court hearings look and feel like in reality. Good evening, judges.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
First of all, thank you so much for being here today. From what I've looked into, there really seems to be nothing else out there like your program. So I'm just so excited to hear all about it. But before we dive in, can we start out with a little more context? And would you, the three of you, mind briefly sharing a little more about who you are, where you sit, and your personal judicial history?
Sure. I can start. My name is Beth Bloom. Vera, let me thank you for shining a light on our program and for everything that you're doing for the community and highlighting the great work of judges across the country. My name is Beth Bloom. I'm here in Miami. I'm at the Miami Federal Courthouse. I've been a judge on the bench for, this will be 10 years on the federal bench as a United States District Judge. Before that, for almost 20 years, I was a state court judge in Miami-Dade County.
Hi, I'm Robin Rosenberg, and I am a district court judge as well, and I'm in the same district actually as Judge Bloom and Judge Maynard. We're all in the Southern District of Florida. I sit in West Palm Beach, and my career as a federal judge is very similar to Judge Bloom's. We came on the federal bench probably within 3 weeks of each other, so also since 2014, also marking a 10-year anniversary. I too was also a state court judge prior to that, although not as long as Judge Bloom. And then prior to that, had multiple jobs, both here in Florida and Washington, D.C., in the government and in private practice. That's pretty much my professional career.
Hi, I'm Shaniek Maynard, and I'm a magistrate judge here in the Southern District of Florida. And I was appointed to the bench in June of 2017. So amazingly, I think I'm going on almost 7 years on the bench. Prior to that, I ran a nonprofit working with juveniles involved in gangs, trying to get them on the right track and reintegrated into society in a positive way. Before that, I was a federal prosecutor for 7 years. And before that, I did complex civil litigation at a law firm in Washington, D.C.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm so thrilled to meet all three of you. And just kind of in awe of how much rich and valuable and diverse experience you have, not just as individuals, but as a collective force of nature. And I'm so excited to hear about the origins of the project that you're here to share with us today and what it comes down to. So what is this initiative exactly? And how did it start to blossom back when it first began?
So I can start us off. The Civil Discourse and Difficult Decisions program, which is coined CD3, was started back in 2017. As Robin stated, and Robin and Shaniek and I are friends, so I'm going to refer to them by their first name because that's how we communicate with each other. But Robin and I were former state court judges, and when we came on the bench, not very long after, we both were appointed in 2014. We had a discussion. We talked about how the climate in our country was such that we saw a lot of uncivil communication within communities, both large and small, certainly in the national venue, so to speak. And our children were watching, and we were concerned that our children were learning, not only our children, because Robin and I each have 3 children, our children, because at that time our children were young, and they were watching on the news our leaders communicating disrespectfully. And we felt that we needed to do something. And as state court judges and now federal court judges, we were involved in sentencing, and we saw good people making bad decisions. And we felt that it was important to teach young people about decisions that they make in their lives that may have lifelong permanent consequences. So that was really the genesis of the Civil Discourse and Difficult Decisions program. And that is to communicate with respect and make the right decision so you're not involved in the criminal justice system, and you can understand how your decisions may impact you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
around those themes, we created the program, and the driving force, as Beth says, were those two themes. And I think that's what makes it unique. So at the end of the day, it's a program that may appear similar to other court-based programs insofar as we bring students into the courtroom, although we've been creative over time, particularly during the pandemic when we couldn't bring students into the courtroom. And so we converted the program to a virtual program, and we did shorter versions of it online. And also we go to schools. So for example, Shaniek and I were recently at Duke Law School, and we actually did the program at the law school. We've also done it at colleges that have mock trial rooms, moot court rooms on campus, like for example, Palm Beach State College, and we did the program there. But at the end of the day, the vision was always, and most programs are, in the federal courtroom. And yes, there is a federal court case, and yes, there are certain of the students who do argue. So if a student is interested in that aspect of the program, they're going to get the courtroom drama experience, so to speak, the oral advocacy. But that is not the point of the program. And that's what makes this unique. There are really four components of it. The first is kind of setting ground rules that all of the students participate in, and they learn basic tenets of civility and civil discourse. It may seem basic because it is, but our thought was we actually need to go back to the basics. We need to know how to look each other in the eye and talk, not through our phone, but with using our words and our mouth, and eye contact and respect, and not being distracted, and watching our tone, and all of those things that you think you would know after second grade. But surprisingly, we felt it needed to be, and it's borne out to be true. It needs to be reinforced. So everybody has ground rules that are set from the beginning. Everybody takes a kind of a civility test, so they can kind of do their own independent assessment of what are trigger points for them, and how do they act under certain circumstances that might cause stress or might cause you to act out in a way that you may later regret. Everybody gets prepped on either making the oral argument. So the students who are going to make the oral argument get prepped on that by volunteer lawyers. So the program is comprised of judge and volunteer lawyers who come in to assist. And then the jurors, the other students who serve as jurors, will get prepped on how to be jurors, how to listen, how to keep an open mind. And one of the benefits of the program is it really is preparing our students to be jurors. I mean, they may be jurors at the time, prospective jurors at the time they're participating in the program at the age of 18, or they could be called up a year or two later. So one of the unintended consequences but positive consequences, is preparing students to be good jurors if and when they're called up. They all take what's called a reality quiz. So they have to answer certain questions about factual scenarios regarding criminal activity, and whether certain activity does give rise to a violation of the law or not. And so we teach them those points and those particular fact patterns. But at the end of the day, what we ultimately tell them is that it's not about these particular fact patterns, but it's about the larger issue of making the right decisions, knowing when something doesn't sound right, something seems a little daunting or potentially troubling, and either using your own good senses or knowing who to go to, whether it's a parent, a friend, or a teacher, for advice before you make a decision that can set in motion a series of consequences that at times can be very difficult to unwind. And we often use the example because the students are actually sitting at the tables where real defendants sit when they're getting sentenced. And we tell them that, bad decisions in the worst case scenarios lead people not unlike you to end up in a courtroom like this, sitting at a table like you, facing a judge like me, being sentenced for a crime that began with a bad decision. So those are some of the key components of the program.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like such an eye-opening and transformative experience for someone at that stage in their life. And from that starting point, in that space, how has it evolved over time? Are there things that you've learned along the way that you've sought to change because of feedback maybe, or just because of developments in the judicial space? I'm just curious how you've tailored it to the times that it's started to live in.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some of that. About 3 years into us doing it, the pandemic happened. And so one of the first adjustments we had to make was figuring out how to still give students this experience, even though we couldn't physically bring them into the courthouses. And I think it was even more important because many of the students were being educated remotely. And so for them to be able to have this experience as something different, in addition to their remote curriculum, I think was really, really important. So I would say our first big change was sort of morphing it to where it could be done virtually or in person. And then after the pandemic, we started bringing them back into the courthouses. But I think also thinking about how can we take this program that initially was targeted toward high school students and expand it to college students. We've done it at community colleges. And as Robin mentioned, most recently at Duke Law School. And so that has required us to make the material more mature, right, for students who are at a different stage in their lives and a different stage in their careers, make it challenging, but also be able to convey the same basic message about how we communicate, how we interact, how it's possible to stand up for something you believe in strongly and passionately, and even disagree if needed, but do it in a way that's still respectful of the other person's opinion and try to come to a joint solution or determination.
And what Shaniek and Robin have done is really expand the program to an audience that we never envisioned in the beginning. We started out focusing on high school students on the cusp of becoming an adult. And that's why the difficult decisions component was as important as the basic tools of active listening, of engaging in respectful discussion. But what we also found is that even though the three of us in 2017, once Shaniek got on the bench, she hit the ground running with us, we realized that we not only could expand it to audiences. As Shaniek said, in 2020, we needed to pivot to an entirely remote program. We were able to take what is historically a 3-hour program in the courtroom and adapt it to a 90-minute, even a 60-minute program. And that's where the program has become adaptable in terms of the audience, but also it's not just the three of us that are performing this program. The CD3 program has expanded across the country, and it's expanded because we were able to have the Federal Bar Association adopt it as a national impact program. We've been working with the Federal Bar Association local chapters, and the attorneys have become really the ambassadors of civility. They volunteer their time and work directly with the judge as part of the program. The program it obviously needs a judge to preside over the third aspect, which is the courtroom simulation, and also to discuss the reality check. But it's really the attorneys that are the most impactful, because the attorneys discuss how they entered the law, a little bit about their background. These are volunteer attorneys that work directly with the judge, and that's what is so beautiful. And I must say that the teachers themselves, whether they're high school students, or high school teachers, college professors, or even law school professors, they are so engaged in the program because they're learning as well. So everyone learns together and becomes part of the solution, which was what we identified in the beginning. And I think we're on the right road.
I absolutely agree. Go ahead.
Oh, if I could also just add to that, I think in addition to the attorneys becoming ambassadors for the program, since probably 2018, the Federal Judicial Center, which educates and trains new judges, has invited me to participate in training baby magistrate judges. And we do a plenary session where I talk about the civil discourse and decision-making program to new judges who are often in a space of trying to figure out, how they can still be involved in their community and how they can still impact the community beyond what they do on the bench. And so we've had magistrate judges from across the country, even in the District of Puerto Rico, Eastern District of New York, so many districts, magistrate judges from across the country have done this program. A colleague in the District of Puerto Rico got all the materials translated into Spanish for the students there. And so it's really been exciting to see how both judges and lawyers tailor the program to the needs of their communities and their students.
And also the event. We should talk about Constitution Day and Law Day. It's been easily adaptable, and we've done the CD3 program as part of Constitution Day and Law Day throughout the country.
Wow, I did not realize how far it had spread and how wide your reach has become. I'm blown away by this, and also by the tapestry of community that you've woven, just how many threads are pulled together, how many different parts of your districts are involved and passionate about this. And leading from that, I'm wondering if there's anything that has stood out to you and how this has impacted all those moving parts, the teachers, the students, the judges, the lawyers. Where have you been able to see this make its mark?
I think, we probably don't appreciate the complete reach and breadth of how much of a difference it's made, because you can't really follow any one student through the rest of his or her life. And, you never know in one's life and one's path what made the difference. Probably it's a lot of things, but I think our hope is, and I think we have reason to believe we've been successful in that, insofar as the students, is that we do have them fill out an evaluation, a feedback form, if you will, at the end of every program, so that we can learn from their responses as to how the program, if it needs to be improved or tweaked, and what's resonating and what isn't. And we gather them, and we review them, and to the last one, there is always a nugget. There is always, I learned that I need to listen better, or I shouldn't buy steroids on the internet, or I never knew that using a fake ID could end up with an identity theft, offense of a 2-year mandatory minimum. So you see these 1 or 2 nuggets. You generally see things like, I didn't realize judges were so nice and are human. And I'd only seen them on the TV, and they're always banging their gavel. And that's one of those unintended benefits, is that it is educating the community through the children about who we are as judges, who the lawyers are, what a courtroom looks like. It's not a mean, scary place. People are nice, people are welcoming. This is how the system works. And I think the more we can foster an understanding of this branch of the government in an unintimidating, accessible way, the better off we are. I think that we are lacking in our society today a sufficient education and knowledge in civics education, and an understanding of what each of the branches of government, and conclusions are drawn often in negative ways, because it's fueled by information that isn't necessarily based on something they can touch and feel. So this touch and feel aspect of it that I think they will never forget. And if they can just remember one thing that one judge says about think before you act, that could potentially make all of the difference between that person going on and having a career in law, or ending up in a courtroom facing a judge because one bad decision led to a bigger bad decision, which led to the ultimate bad decision, which is committing a crime. And furthermore, we do hear from the teachers. Today, I had a teacher in. He's been coming since 2017. He must have been here 20 times with his public school students. His name is Mr. Winkles. And he can't get enough of it, because he talks to them about these issues leading up to the program, they talk about it when they go back. And so you're getting that reinforcement from the teacher about the principles that we try to convey in the period of time. So that's some of the experiences that I've had. I would say also that another unintended benefit is that, look, the judiciary is not immune from its own acrimony, whether it be judges not getting along with each other, or lawyers, God forbid, not getting along with each other, or lawyers not understanding judges and judges not understanding lawyers. When you have in a courtroom with this common mission of trying to educate and help students, and the judge and the lawyers are all on the same page, they come together like in no other courtroom setting. And lawyers become friendly with adversaries. Lawyers get to know judges on a personal level and see them in a new light. And that has created, by the way, civility among judges and lawyers, which is also something that is imperative that we promote within our branch of government.
Yeah, so true. And it also exposes the human element. One of the wonderful just consequences of the program is students really get to learn from judges who they are, their challenges, how they got to their position. The same with lawyers, their struggles, and they see a lot of themselves in the individuals that they did not know were individuals that they could become at one point. They could become a lawyer, they could become a courtroom deputy, or a court reporter, or an interpreter, and they learn all about the aspects of not only the positions, but the people behind those positions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would add to that, for me, this program is really near and dear to my heart, because the way that I came to the decision in my own life to become a lawyer was through a program very much like civil discourse and decision making. I was in high school. I had no lawyers or judges in my family. I'd never been into a courtroom. I'd never thought about being a lawyer. And I participated in a program called Teen Court that our state court did, where they brought in students to act as prosecutors and defenders and jurors for a teenager who had committed a low-level misdemeanor. And, for me to have that experience at, 14 years old, to work with a lawyer and stand before a judge, really gave me this sense of the courtroom as a space where I could have a voice, and I could advocate on behalf of others who didn't have a voice. And I never forgot that moment. And it really was key in me deciding to become a lawyer. And so when, being able to bring students like I was into the courthouse, sometimes, I know Robin and Beth have had this experience. Sometimes we're on the bench and defendants will have their children in the courtroom. And I always think, like, what a first impression of what a court is, to be sitting there while someone you love is facing criminal charges. So from my perspective, for us to be able to bring young people into our courthouses, not as, family members of defendants or victims or witnesses, but as attorneys and judges and jurors, really as people seeing themselves as having a stake in making justice happen. I think it's life-changing. It was life-changing for me, and I think it's life-changing for a lot of the young people who come through this program.
So
Mm-hmm.
true.
It's so beautiful to hear your story. And I can't imagine what it means to be able to give that back to the community today. You've created such a beautiful gift, and I can just hear how the effects are cascading. And I'm so inspired by that. And for all of you, I know you spoke a little bit about it, Judge Maynard, but how has this impacted you as individuals? Seeing the change that you're able to make and hearing from the people who you're intertwining your courthouse with.
Yeah, for me, it is, I love my job, and a lot of what we do sometimes can be heart-wrenching and sad and, stressful. So it really, for me, is the self-care of being a judge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, doing civic engagement, working with students, bringing them into the courthouse, engaging with the teachers, is how I keep my own positive outlook about the impact that we're having and the work that we're doing. And, in one of the programs I was involved in, not this particular program, but we brought young people into the courthouse. One of the participants wrote a letter to me afterwards, just saying, coming into the courthouse and meeting you changed my life. You know, he decided to go to Howard University because a number of the judges that he met here were graduates of Howard University. He went on to do very well at Howard. He's now at Howard Law School. And actually, I went up to DC in October for my 25th class reunion, and I went to chapel and I heard somebody say Judge Maynard, and I turned around and it was him, you know. And so, you know, just how incredible is that to be able to give back in such a tangible way and to see, you know, it really impacting a young person's life. It's really pretty phenomenal.
I think
That is so
us,
beautiful.
It makes us better as better people and better judges. I guess I'd just say a couple of things. You know, as judges, we are very limited in what we can do. And that's one of the downsides of becoming a judge, is that you have to withdraw in many respects from society. You can't be on boards, you can't be members of organizations necessarily. It's very restrictive for all of the obvious reasons relating to codes of ethics and whatnot. So to be able to do something this gratifying within the confines of our job responsibilities is a wonderful outlet. And I think it makes us, you also hear perceptions of federal judges in particular being so removed from reality. You know, we sit in these big courthouses, we don't see anybody, we've lost touch. And it hopefully removes any stigma of that to that effect. But to the extent that a judge can get removed because of what she does, this is a way to make sure you remain engaged and connected with society and the people who appear before you. I think that most of us have this in us. I mean, most people want to do good things, and sometimes they just don't have the time or they don't know what to do. One of the things that we did with this program was we made it very easy. And we can share with you, or you can share with your audience, you know, the resource materials that are on the U.S. Court website and the FBA website. But it literally is one press of a button and all of the materials get downloaded. A judge in Oklahoma could get on the website and print out the materials and know exactly what he needs to say in court, and the lawyers would know what to say. It's a ready-made, easy to use template that can be used as is, or as Beth said, adapted to other court programs. Another court may have its own special program, but they want to add something to it. So just add the civility part to it. Just bring in those ground rules that we've already prepared. Bring in that civility test so that you can match that with whatever other program. So we tried to make it really easy. So for any judge who's out there, any lawyer who wants to do the program, it's really easy, and it takes some time, but you know, really, what's 3 hours of your day? We all have 3 hours to give. So it's really the lawyers who are billing their time. And the fact is they give up that billable time and they come into court because it's so rich for them. And we can find a morning when we're not conducting a sentencing or a hearing or a trial. We all have it. I know we do, because we're in one of the busiest districts in the country, and we all do it. We've had every judge in our district do it at least once, if not more than once. It's absolutely a doable thing.
And that's so true. And we're not the only ones. I truly believe that there are many judges and lawyers out there that are public servants because their best days are when they make a difference in the lives of others. And as Robin said, it's not a lot of time. The materials are there. We want to make sure that everyone knows who's watching this that the Administrative Office of the United States Courts and Rebecca Fanning, who's the National Court Outreach Manager, has been instrumental. She not only has creativity, she has wisdom and organizational skills, and she's placed all of the materials on one site that lawyers and judges can go. There's really very little preparation, and all of the materials are there. So if there is anyone that has in their heart, as I know so many people do, the willingness and really the willingness and the wherewithal to make a change in the lives of others in their community, this is the perfect program for them.
Yeah, I'm really touched by that notion that anyone can do this. And I think it really rings so true for me. And I'm just really, yeah, I really believe that as well. If if there's others out there who want to make this change in a similar way, I know you said it's so accessible. We'll make sure to link to the places where you can start this journey. But from your perspective, just to give a little extra push, do you have any insider tips and tricks, any small insights or big ones, just things that might have been helpful for you to know when you were starting out?
I think that, at the end of the day, like anything, to be successful, it takes commitment and passion. And I don't think this program necessarily would have gotten off the ground despite any and all resources thrown at us had Beth, Shaniek, and I not had a 1000% commitment and passion to do this, because it meant something to us. So I think if that resonates with anybody, then that's where you start. And honestly, I think it's been infectious because of that. Practically speaking, Beth mentioned the resources. She mentioned Rebecca Fanning. That would be the first call I would make if I were somebody listening who wanted to start the program, other than also calling Shaniek, Beth, or I, or emailing us. We have a team of FBA lawyers, Federal Bar Association lawyers, who have had Zooms with FBA counterparts in states all across the country to prep them if they needed, hands-on tutorial on how to run the program. In a perfect world, but it's not a perfect world and resources are scarce, if a district had a coordinator position, maybe out of the clerk's office, we did at one point. We had a person who has devoted part of her time to being a community outreach coordinator in addition to her other responsibilities. So she was sort of the glue that could help logistically pull a lot of these programs together. She left, and we haven't replaced the position yet. Not every court is authorized to do that or has the funding. It can be done without it, but if you want to think creatively and a district is committed to that, and there is the resources, even if it's a part-time position, having somebody who is devoted to community outreach and using the Civil Discourse Difficult Decisions program as one of their primary programs, where they can coordinate with the lawyers and the judges and the security officers to get the students through, it might make it that much easier. We sort of run on autopilot here now, but I can see how that would be incredibly helpful if somebody had the wherewithal to think creatively about using a part-time position to help them do that. And I know many districts.
If I guess one tip that I've come up with, or insight that I've had over the years we've been doing it. So for those who decide to do the program, when you download the materials, you'll see it really doesn't take that many volunteers to do. You need someone to be the role of the judge, the presiding judge. You also need 2 to 4 volunteer attorneys to work with the students who are making their argument and help them prepare their argument. And you also need, and I think it's probably the most important key role, a facilitator. Most of the parts are fairly scripted, like the judge's role is fairly scripted. The arguments for the attorneys are fairly scripted. But I have found doing this various times with various facilitators that to the degree you can find a facilitator, a volunteer attorney who is able to engage, ask questions, get the young people involved, especially with the high school students, especially with teenagers. They come in not knowing exactly what to expect, not feeling completely comfortable. And so getting that facilitator that's really able to engage them, get them interested, ask them thought-provoking questions, because we want them to come up with the insights about civility and effective communication. It's not like a lecture listener format. It's an engaging format. And so, as Robin said, all 3 of us are happy to talk to any judges or lawyers around the country who want to do this program and help you brainstorm the best way of doing it in your court.
And my tip is the Federal Bar Association has adopted CD3 as a national program. There are 100 active local chapters throughout the country. So if an attorney is interested, even a judge that doesn't know where to start, the local FBA chapter, each one has a civics liaison, and it's very easy to work with the chapters put the program together, to find the schools that are willing to bring the students into the courthouse, and that's never been a problem. We've always had the schools that are willing to work with the lawyers and the judge.
Thank you so much for all that insight. I'm so glad to hear about all these chapters. I mean, seriously, here's to 100 more. You three and all of those who have followed in your footsteps are truly changing lives. And I'm so grateful to have learned so much from you three today. And I hope that this only continues to grow through the years.
Thanks, Vera.
Thank you so
Yeah, well,
much.
thank you for having us.
Thank you so
Vera.
much for having us.